education. So please put your hands together. I believe Caroline's going to come up and set her up here, set up her presentation, and let's put our hands together for Professor Margaret Barry.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thanks to Caroline and the organisers for inviting me to present. We had a great set of presentations this morning. So I'm just going to, let me see now, this lad here, okay. I'm just going to speak to a mental health promotion approach. So in the talk, I want to unpack a bit, what does that mean, what does it look like, and essentially how it reframes the challenge of how we set about improving mental health and well-being. Also want to look a bit at implementing a whole campus approach, and it's really quite challenging, and to really fully integrate mental health promotion at an organisational level and at the level of kind of the core mission of the university or college, the strategic plans, getting it right in there, and the everyday operations, because that's where it'll really make a difference. And then creating, because we're talking about a settings-based approach, creating supportive campus environments and a culture of mental well-being, where mental well-being matters, where it's taken care of. And for that, we've got to make sure that there's capacity to deliver, there's capacity to implement comprehensive whole institution approach. And in that way, then we look to create mentally healthy higher education settings. So stating, I suppose, something that probably all of you here take for granted, but that mental health is a critical component of health and well-being, and promoting good mental health is a core function of ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all. We can't talk about health and well-being without mental health being integral to that. It's a positive resource for living, which enables us all to manage our lives successfully. We know that when we promote good mental health, that it contributes not only to the functioning of individuals, but to families, communities, and to society at large, both in terms of our social and economic prosperity. It's a central plank of that. Higher education settings have a critical role to play in promoting mental health and well-being, because good mental health enables us to grow and to learn well. To academically progress, we need to be there, present, and able to learn. And it enables us as well to achieve our full potential, which is of course one of the key missions of our Irish education system. It reduces the risk for poor mental health, and it promotes well-being. So we live in quite a complex world, and I think for young people quite a competitive world. There's lots of opportunities, but there's also lots of challenges, and we need, I think, a broad set of skills for positive development across the life course, including social and emotional development skills, how we manage ourselves, how we relate with others, and manage the world around us. And also, I think, higher education is a key time of transition, as was mentioned this morning, going into it, progressing through it, coming out for students. And so exposed and experimenting with new life experiences, that's a critical part of it. And it's a time of great personal and social development, as well as intellectual development. So it's really important. But we do also know that increasingly young people are reporting poorer mental health. And all of the studies here this morning and the Eurostudent report has shown that. Both our Irish studies, European, international. And we also know that disadvantaged and minority student groups are affected disproportionately with poorer social, academic and mental health outcomes, and they're often interlinked. So there is, I think, increased recognition of the importance of, promoting social and emotional well-being in order to achieve positive outcomes in life. Because if we have good social and emotional well-being, it's a key asset for our mental health and our general health, but also for our social and economic development, as I said. Organisations like WHO, UNICEF and the OECD really kind of stress the fact that if we have good mental well-being and the skills that go with that it really creates positive outcomes in our school and education, but also in work and life more generally. So really this is where I think the phrase about building academic success through promoting mental health and well-being is really kind of based on that. We know the negative impact that the pandemic had on mental health, and it's been well documented, including for the third level students. You know, we've seen increasing levels of poor mental health. And also we know that those negative impacts increased existing inequities for students who were already struggling, and for those who were exposed to social inequities, they fared worse. So it highlighted the fact that we need to respond to these needs in a different way. Not everybody needed one-to-one individual treatment, but we all needed some support. And so this is looking at the need for a population-level approach to how we promote mental health, so that we can support people in protecting and enhancing their mental health and well-being and reduce inequities. And we can do that through both universal approaches for everybody, for the general population, and then more targeted approaches for people who are at higher risk. So policies and practices are needed, obviously, to support that at a population level, beyond the one-to-one service approach. And that is to ensure that the conditions that create good mental health and that reduce inequities, that these are accessible to all, not just to some. Over 20 years ago, the WHO were very clear. I mean, in terms of mental health, we have big gaps in terms of treatment, and we need to make sure that people have access to the best available treatment as quickly as possible. But we also know that treatment approaches on their own are not enough, and that we really need to have a comprehensive public health approach, embracing promotion and prevention alongside treatment and recovery. This is exactly what's happened in almost every area of public health. Cardiovascular health, non-communicable diseases. We don't just rely on treatment, we also need to look at prevention and promotion. It's been slower, I think, happening in the area of mental health. But as I said, the WHO have been developing a series of policies and supports to make that real. And I think it's not an either or, we need the full continuum. And that's, I think, important. So when we start to look at mental health from the point of view of promoting mental health, it does bring a paradigm change in how we think about this. So it leads us to consider what is good mental health, what do we understand by that, and how do we promote positive mental health and well-being, and do that at a population level. Also the fact that mental and physical health are much more interrelated than the way our services are structured. You know, they're all very separated, but it's much more interlinked. And we need to look at strategies that can be used at the population level to promote mental health for the greatest number of people, right? So that's moving beyond the mental health services. And we want to focus on the potential of people for good mental health in the context of their everyday settings where they live their lives. And that means addressing the determinants of mental health, and particularly the wider social determinants. So we begin to reframe how we think about improving mental health, because we begin to start to think upstream in terms of this. Oh, holy moly, right. Okay, we're all right. This approach is very much represented in our global policy frameworks. If we look at the Comprehensive Mental Health Action Plan published in 2013 and refreshed in 2021, and it very much talks about the need for comprehensive strategies, and also the fact that we need a whole of government, whole of society approach. And we need that if we're going to address the determinants of mental health. So it's got to be, the responsibility has to go beyond the health sector. We've also seen for the first time promoting mental health and well-being explicitly referenced in the Sustainable Development Goals. And that places mental health in a much broader context, realising that all of the 17 goals are interlinked, and mental health contributes and is influenced by all of those. You know, gender equality, access to education, the quality of the environment, this all impacts on our mental health. Likewise, in 2021, WHO published the Geneva Charter for Wellbeing, putting a real emphasis on the need for well-being societies. And doing that within ecological limits, looking at the planet and how that impacts our health. So it's a really broad-based approach, but saying that if we want to look at flourishing and enabling physical and mental health potential, we've got to put it in this broad context. Our Irish policy documents very much reflect this. If we look at our mental health strategies here in Healthy Ireland, they're very much sharing a whole population approach. They address the social determinants of mental health, is very strongly emphasised, and also the need for the whole of government, whole of society. So that means inter-sectoral action, essentially. And we have now, for the first time, the HSE Mental Health Promotion Plan, Stronger Together, launched in 2022, and the Department of Health are currently working on a national mental health promotion plan, which will again take this forward. We also have a Wellbeing framework for Ireland, which is based on the OECD Wellbeing framework, and this again shows how interlinked health and wellbeing is with our ecological, social, economic and health policies. They're all interlinked because these are the determinants of health. So it's putting it into a much larger framework. Our understanding of mental health has I think, really improved and certainly changed since I studied what mental health was, because then it was largely studied, through a kind of psychopathology approach. But now we have a much better understanding that mental health is more than the absence of mental disorder, and that it can be defined as a state of mental well-being. So essentially a resource that enables us to realise our abilities to learn and work well and to contribute to our community. So it's a critical positive resource. We have more theory and more research regarding the nature of good mental health, coming from positive psychology, coming from the science of well-being, and also from sociological, epidemiological studies looking at this over time. And we know there are at least two components. There's the hedonic component of subjective well-being and life satisfaction, how we feel, but also then the eudaimonic component of positive functioning, engagement and social well-being, and both elements are really important. So it isn't just what's going on in your head, it's what's going on around you as well. And we know more about the determinants of mental health, that there are multiple interacting determinants, again going beyond the individual, going beyond the biological, psychological and physical, to also embrace social, cultural, economic and environmental factors. Where we live our lives really shapes our mental health. Okay, it's where our mental health is created and it's where our mental health is damaged. So if we really want to bring sustainable change, we've got to look at that, because it's in the context of our everyday lives that the difference can be made. The area of mental health promotion has developed, I'd say, over the last 30 years as a multidisciplinary area of research and practice, and its concern is really, it's focused mainly on strengthening protective factors for good mental health and well-being. So it's focusing at the mental health and positive mental health end of the continuum, and how we can strengthen that through access to skills, resources and supportive environments that will keep individuals and populations mentally healthy and enhance equity. And you will, I don't know if you can see the figure there at the back, but it just shows that we need a continuum where mental health promotion sits alongside prevention, alongside treatment, and alongside recovery. And while promotion focuses on strengthening protective factors, prevention tends to focus on reducing risk factors. Now, the two areas contribute together, but they start in slightly different places. Okay? But we need a continuum in terms of how that's done. And a couple of years ago, we published the Implementing Mental Health Promotion text to bring together examples of evidence-based practice from around the world in terms of making this real and how it can really be implemented in a local context in a sustainable way. So mental health promotion draws on the fundamental concepts and principles of health promotion, and the Ottawa Charter will be familiar to many of you, but it adopts a systems approach. So it says if we want to, we have this socio-ecological model of health, that we understand it in the context of the person, in the context of their environment, their community, how services are organised, and how all that is shaped by policy. So to bring about change, we need action, integrated action at each of those levels. We can't just focus here and say, let's develop personal skills. We actually have to look at the environment. We have to look at the policies. We have to look at reorienting our services and our support. And when we get that working together, then we can look at promoting in a more sustainable way good mental health and well-being, underpinned by core principles of participation, empowerment, equity and social justice. The principles of mental health promotion is that we focus on the whole population, not a subset. It's a population level approach. We focus on protective factors and seek to address the broad determinants of mental health. In terms of both the socioeconomic and cultural environments as well as the individual level. So we need complementary approaches and strategies at each of these levels, and essentially intersectoral action extending beyond the mental health services. An important aspect of mental health promotion is attempting to address the social determinants. If we follow this socio-ecological model, we need to do it at each of the levels. So we strengthen individuals and their skills, we strengthen communities, the sense of belonging, inclusion and participation, reorienting our services to integrate a focus on promotion and prevention. So there's a continuum of supports, removing the structural barriers at a societal level, and here at the level of a culture of respect, a culture of dignity, social justice, the quality of the physical environment, the social environment, and our economic policies. And so all of these, so we talk about a mental health in all policies approach because all these policies impact on mental health. So we have to have comprehensive and universal actions across the life course and across these various levels. So in terms of what works, we have now a strong international evidence base concerning the impact of mental health promotion interventions. And the ones that, the kind of approach generally is to look at a life course approach starting from prenatally right up to older age. So we look across the life course. A settings approach, so looking at homes, schools, colleges, communities, workplaces, virtual settings, because that's where we live. And a determinants of mental health approach, which I've already spoken about. And we've been engaged in producing evidence synthesis over the years now in terms of the evidence, because when mental health promotion came up first, does it work? Does it make a difference? Is it worth investing in? So you have to put the evidence there and bring it out. So we've done a lot of reports for WHO, the World Bank, for different government agencies. But essentially, there is now a lot of evidence to support implementation and the scaling up of what works. In 2001, as part of the International Union for Health Promotion and Education, we published a position statement drawing on this evidence base to say, as we come out of the pandemic, it's absolutely critical that we now invest in these priority actions that we know have evidence behind them and actually scale those up in a sustainable way. And you can find out more about that there. But because we do know that when you promote good mental health, it does lead to lasting benefits, not only for individuals, but for families and society. So we can increase protective factors, reduce risk factors, but also it leads to positive outcomes in other areas. So, for example, it improves academic performance, employment prospects, social functioning and health. And we also now have we need more, but we have a body of evidence around the kind of the cost benefits of mental health promotion to show that it is a sound investment. When we invest in mental health promotion, we get a big social return and economic return because there is a reduced need for health services, criminal justice services, for welfare support. So we have a convincing scientific case, but also a convincing social and economic case for investing in mental health promotion. Now, when we look at the educational setting, much of the evidence that we have, the evidence is strongest in relation to schools. The evidence from schools is much stronger than in higher education because that research has been going on for much longer. But what we can take from that is that we know in schools that there's a strong base of support for the implementation of skill-based social and emotional learning, taking a whole school approach. And both universal and targeted approaches. Because we know that those types of programs where there's an emphasis on social and emotional learning, that it's about teaching and learning of foundational skills for life, attitudes and resources that are really valuable throughout the life course, how we communicate, how we work as a team member, developing empathy, creativity, problem-solving skills. Even children as young as 3 or 4 can learn these. And we can see the impact that it has. Regulating and managing our emotions, we need to do that every day. Our coping strategies and our sense of control and efficacy, these really matter, they make a difference. And what we know from school-based research is that we need to have tiered delivery within a whole school approach. So it has to be a coordinated and a sequenced approach. Not only what's taught in the curriculum, but also the ethos and the environment of the educational setting, the policies and the community partnerships. And when you get all of those aligned, that's really when sustainable change can really happen at a systems level. And that's really what will make the difference. So I suppose we need to look at evidence-based approaches that can be embedded into the core business of the school or the educational setting. And we've seen in schools, you know, a move away from discrete programs to looking at evidence-based strategies that can be embedded within the everyday delivery of the school. So that is really at the policy level, at the practice level, and supporting teachers to do that and supporting implementation to make sure, because that is where the delivery will really be impacted. I just want to I just flash this up because these are the Collaborative for Academic, Social and Emotional Learning. They've highlighted what they consider to be some of the core skills for social and emotional learning. And I think these are rather interesting because they're not only useful for young people. I think these are skills we all need across the life course. You know, to know oneself and to know one's strengths, to manage emotions, set goals, plans, and solve problems creatively. You know, I think we all struggle, you know, with that. Social awareness, care for others, empathy, appreciate diversity, relationship skills, negotiating fairly, refusing provocations and seeking help, responsible decision making, acting ethically, appropriate social norms and respect for others. I mean, what a different world we would have if we all had PhDs in that. You know, where we really can put them into practice. And it strikes me that the teaching and learning of these fundamental personal and social skills, you know, could really be incorporated into our higher education curricula. I was just reading at the weekend about the amount of funding that is going in now to researching and advancing artificial general intelligence. And we've got really competitive, high-end researchers working on this. But the concern is, if they manage to get there, what will the impact be for the world? What are the consequences? What are the ethical impacts of the science that's being developed? So it's really important that these kind of skills are instilled alongside the cognitive and intellectual skills, that we really think about what we're doing and the impact of that, and that, you know, higher education has a role to play in that. So promoting higher education, promoting mental health in the higher education setting, you know, it's a really important setting for doing that, for the reasons that were all said this morning. You know, the Minister said it, I think everybody said it. But it's also promoting both, we have to remember, it's both staff and students. Because higher education settings are where people live, students live on residence, where we learn, work, play and love. Okay, so it embraces all of that. And so we have to think, it's a whole campus approach, so that's both staff and students. And it's where critical skills are taught and learned. It's a very big socialising context that can have a very significant influence on the development of individuals, communities, but also society at large. Developing a sense of citizenship and connectedness with community and broader society, looking at education as a public good rather than an individual achievement. You know, that's really important to look from that point of view. And also the aspiration is that education would be transformative, that it would enable us to learn new knowledge, to think in different ways, to develop critical thinking skills, better understanding, creativity and innovation that can be used for public good. So it's really important, and this is why I think and Christiane Stock talked about the origins of the WHO Health Promoting Universities and Colleges initiative, was saying this is in a very important setting. And so we need to look at how we can create healthy working, learning and living environments for students and staff. And I would argue we need to solidly integrate mental health into the culture, structure and processes of university and college settings. That's really important. I'm just going to do a quick check on time. It's okay? Yeah. In terms of, we're building success through promoting good mental health and well-being. Here again, I'm drawing on the evidence from two sources. from mental health promotion in schools and mental health promotion in the workplace. And these are the positive outcomes that can be achieved. So, as I said, improving academic performance, motivation and a sense of connectedness, promoting student well-being and the development of social and emotional skills, maintaining a healthy and productive workforce. Universities are pretty competitive places to be now for staff as well, and if staff aren't happy, that's not going to create a very good environment for students either. Boosting student and staff performance, preventing and reducing mental health problems, improving social behaviours and reducing problem behaviours, be that in terms of bullying, substance misuse, conflict, reducing student dropout rates, and we do have evidence on that, that in schools you can reduce dropout rates if you, if you promote social and emotional learning as part of universal delivery, and staff absenteeism, and we know that when staff are happy, there's going to be fewer health issues and absences. Improving staff-student relationships, stress reduction, and enhancing the overall reputation and the morale of the university or college. So it's really important, and we know that education has a fundamental role to play in addressing social and health inequities. And we're doing well here in that we have a lot of people going through the third level system, and that is a fundamental kind of ladder towards addressing that, but only if we do the right things afterwards. So that's really important. I think both Christiane and Biddy mentioned the Okanagan Charter, which is the international charter driving this, and you can see here like the principles, a settings and a whole systems approach, to really embed mental health in that, comprehensive and campus-wide, participatory approaches that include the voices of the students and others, including staff. So there has to be meaningful involvement, because if we don't feel that it's going to be meaningful and lead to something, being constantly consulted is quite fatiguing, if you don't see action as a result. And then partnerships, cross-sectoral partnerships, transdisciplinary, within and beyond the campus, because, the campus doesn't exist in isolation. It's within an area, a city, a region, etc. Promoting research, innovation and evidence-informed action. So really, expanding the evidence base, building on strengths, because every institution has different strengths. We're not all the same, but it's very important to identify what they are and build on those and the unique strengths that are there in an empowering way. Value local and Indigenous communities, contexts and priorities. So here again, recognising cultural and social diversity and bringing an awareness of that kind of tradition and knowledge into the system. So like the universities of Sanctuary are an example of that, and I know within the University of Galway it focuses not only on refugees but has a large focus on travellers within third level education. So it's creating a more supportive environment and ultimately that, for ethnic minorities and international students. And then promoting basic rights in terms of dignity, respect, equity, social justice. These are fundamental, and we need to see them in action, not just in the strategies. It very much has a huge emphasis on a whole campus approach, the learning environment, but also the organisational culture. And that's absolutely key. I think it's systems change is what's really going to make the fundamental difference, so that it's at the leadership, strategy and governance level, that it's up there and prioritised. Because we can have a bottom-up demand, but we also know that the ethos is often led from the top. So if it's seen as important at that top management leadership level, and then supported, again we see change. So the environment, etc. And as I said here, personal and professional development for both staff and students, and that there's a store put on that it's valued and integrated. And the principles, again, these have been spoken about, so I'm not going to dwell on those. But I think of the key there, sustainability. We can have lots of initiatives that are once-off, but we need to see how they can really be embedded in everyday policies and really bring that in a sustainable way, so it's inclusive, that it's coordinated, and that will, in order to improve mental health and well-being. So their integrated focus on mental health and well-being into everyday operations, business practices and academic matters. How we deal with deferrals, leave of absence, how we deal with students in difficulties, how we deal with budgets, how we deal with resources and allocations, all of this stuff which is the stuff of stress, you know, and how it's managed. So that's, you know, if we see it coming in there, then we'll know it's working, that it's making a difference. Again, the National Student Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Framework with its 9 key themes, but it puts a big emphasis on leadership at a whole sector level. You know, this I think is the next, you know, the next wave of advancement on this. Strategic prioritization, investing in student and staff engagement, and addressing the sources of stress, which we heard about this morning, you know, accommodation, financial stress. You know, students are very stressed about academic performance and exams, but also, and you can see there the numbers of students who have caring responsibilities, who have children. They have a life outside of university as well. So that whole person approach, and really building that in at every level. So I would argue here that we need a continuum of support within a whole campus approach. That means universal approaches for every member of the institution. So there's support for all students and staff in terms of promoting access to life skills, to resources, and to good supportive environments. Also some targeted prevention approaches for those who are at higher risk, be that in terms of depression, anxiety, stress and suicide prevention, and also then targeted approaches for reducing behavioural problems, substance misuse and sexual health difficulties. Again, we heard a lot about the great initiatives this morning. Targeted intervention approaches then for students and staff with more complex needs. Now, those of you who are familiar with the Wellbeing Framework for schools will see that this is very similar. There's support for all, for some and for a few, and the level of, you know, of support given should be proportionate to need, but all need to be present so that it's a coordinated and a sequenced approach. And I think we need to make sure that we've got evidence-based approaches that can be embedded at every level into core business, you know, across the teaching and learning culture, across the environment, what's in the curriculum and the extracurricular activity, the nature of our relationships, and then policy and planning. And I think, you know, the shifting from discrete initiatives, you know, it's good to start discrete initiatives because you have to test somewhere, but gradually we need to move from those to organisational and system level policies and practices that will empower staff and students, will create more supportive environments for promoting good mental health and well-being. So that was really one of the key messages. I think if we want to move to that, I think we have to see a better recognition of the interconnectedness of mental health, well-being and academic achievement. You know, because students who are struggling with mental health issues cannot, you know, achieve academically to their full potential. And if we support students with better mental health and well-being, better social and emotional learning skills, they can achieve better. So getting that connection clear is really important. There needs to be campus-wide awareness of that. And I think at the leadership and management level is crucial. That, you know, really get it in there, to really embed it and to make sure that we've got supportive structures, both in terms of policy but also in terms of delivery, and that it's resourced properly, and that you've got training and CPD for staff. So those kind of effective partnerships, you know, coming right from the top, will make a difference. So we should scale up what works. We do have an evidence base, but I think we do need to strengthen the evidence from the whole campus perspective. That is something that we need more research. I've extrapolated from what we know about schools and what we know about workplaces, but we need more in terms of what we know now about higher education settings. And we want to keep mindful of the equity impact of what's being done, because the student population is not a homogenous one, you know, and there's many different needs. A concern with process, you know, looking at co-production with staff and student engagement, and promoting a sense of ownership around this, and so that people have a sense of connectedness with what is there. And I think implementation support is absolutely key. Even if we have the best evidence-based interventions, if there isn't support around how to really make them work on the ground, it won't make a jot of difference. So that is very fundamental, to have the technical support, the training and the capacity to really do that. And then when we have that, to effectively coordinate it. So it's great that we're getting coordinator positions in place, because coordinating evidence-based approaches across the continuum, that's the challenge. It's a big one in terms of that. So this is my last slide. So I think, you know, in terms of a supportive policy, we have a lot of, and people said it, we have a lot of good policy frameworks now, and we've heard about them. I think in terms of the practices, we need to sort of look to make sure we have the capacity to deliver on those, right? And that the structures and the delivery mechanisms are in place. And I think we need to advance the research, research around implementation research, you know, around interventions, how they work, do they make a difference for whom, particularly at the whole campus level, bridging the no-do gap, and then really mobilising the wider engagement so that mental health and wellbeing becomes central to higher education and government policy. So thank you all very much for listening.